Are you one of the many Magic the Gathering players that are sick and tired of not having an Octopus commander deck? Me too, brother. Alright, we gotta get into the lore on this Chad Octopus. Marvo used to be a normal octopus before a simic experiment that left him with a massively augmented intelligence. Before the experiment could proceed to the next step though, he escaped into the Undercity's waterways, where he happened to encounter Ravnican agency of magicological investigations detectives trawling the waterways for evidence in a simic-related case of biotheft. The detectives found nothing that day, but when they returned the next morning to continue their search, the evidence they needed was on the banks, neatly wrapped in strips of kelp like a present. In the final case notes, the discovery was credited to an unknown aquatic assistant. Marvo is my favorite character from this new set because he's like an underwater Scooby-Doo. This guy's the alternate commander from the pre-con Revenant Recon, and as soon as I saw him, or it, I decided to make this work somehow. So we have a $50 budget deck that puts in a lot of work, man, and you'll hear about some cards you haven't before, or maybe some cards you haven't thought about in a while. As always, if you enjoy this filthy content, like, subscribe, leave a comment, brother. Marvo Deep Operative is 3 blue and a black for a legendary creature, Octopus Rogue. It's a 1/8. When Marvo Deep Operative attacks, clash with defending players, so each clashing player reveals the top card of their library, then puts that card on the top or the bottom. The player wins if their card had a higher mana value. Whenever you win a clash, draw a card. Then you may cast a spell from your hand with a mana value 8 or less without paying its mana cost. Now, clashing, as detailed in the description of Marvo, is an old and very semi-crappy mechanic. There weren't really any cards that made me want to include them in this deck when there's so much tension between top deck manipulation and big spells to cast, so I skewed them in favor of making sure we're winning the clashes that we do get off our commander. It's a 1/8, so it should be able to attack safely most of the time. Demir is really good at reanimating stuff, and the precon has a surveil theme, so I opted to build a cheap, powerful reanimator deck around this sweet octopus. Now, casting spells for free is fun, but how do we get cards to the top of the library? I opted to keep some of the surveil cards and pack the good ones in here. The 1-drops Consider and Otherworldly Gaze are pretty good at this, and like the precon, I added Contingency Plan and Tygam Scheming. These are super efficient, feed the graveyard, can help us win at clashes at opportune times. Tygam, he's a schemer, dude. If you wanted to extend your budget, you got cards like Vampiric Tutor, Scheming Symmetry, and Scroll Rack. These can be a real help if you have those lying around your filthy domicile. Now, we all know this, Brainstorm is good, especially if you have some 8-mana spells stuck in your hand. In fact, it's so good, I would pay triple for it. So then you have Brainstone. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact, has 2 and tap, sacrifice it, draw 3 cards. Then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. It's the same thing, kinda looks like my uncle in the Bronx, dude. And if you're looking at this card, you're feeling the horn, dude, we got that going too. Very old card with a beautiful mermaid blowing for all she's worth. The Conch Horn. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact, has 1 and tap, sacrifice it, draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on top of your library. So we talked about a bunch of the surveil cards in here, including the Doom Whisperer. This guy's a little cheaper right now than it was due to the reprint and the same precon as Marvo. This guy's just a beautiful man. He's got his strong arms. He wants to hold you in the night, brother. So we surveil, we drop cards in the yard, then how are we digging them back out? We could go for the super efficient reanimation spells, but we may have to use these to clash. You have cards like Incarnation Technique. 4 and a black for a sorcery has Demonstrate. When you cast a spell, you may copy it. If you do, choose an opponent to also copy it. Mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. These more mana-intensive reanimation cards can help win clashes, and then we get some real big nasties out of the yard. We want 2 to 3 cards out for this larger amount of mana though. How's about Ever After? This is a big old reanimation spell. 4 black for a sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Each of those creatures is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Put Ever After on the bottom of its owner's library. This is good in this deck, and it's modal. If you only have 1 creature in the yard, remember it says up to. This is what it feels like to be married, brothers. I know some of you out there are married and you're very happy, but most of the time it sucks. Let's just rip the band-aid off. What I'm telling you is to abandon your family, come hang out with Nikki G, we'll play PS5 all day, brother. Then we have cards like Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. I'm unsure about what point in Magic history this is referencing, what he's offering, you know, but Yawgmoth at one point was just a big old wall, dude. I don't know why, but this is removal and revival in 1 card. Can hit any graveyard if your opponent has something juicy in there. Yawgmoth is probably offering those forbidden Skittles, dude, watch out. And of course, Breach the Multiverse is just a great spell to cast for free, or in just about any deck. Love this thing with its fallopian tubes, its Fimbrier leading directly from the graveyard to your side of the battlefield, dude. I love this card because it also mills 10 cards. If you don't have anything in your graveyard, cast it, see what happens. Now we do have a couple budget tutors in this deck. I mean, what if you clashed with Demonic Tutor? You know what would happen? You'd lose the clash, buddy. But we want to add a little consistency to the deck. Final parting, Liliana waits until after you pay the bill for the $75 salad she ordered and all the drinks. Then she tells us she wants to do a final parting. You know, she wants to pursue some other things. She doesn't have time to date. And then you see her hanging out with Jace. Then we come to the part of the deck that I like to call the Rune Boys. We got Burning Rune Demon here, Rune Scarred Demon. That's what I call them. They're the Rune Boys, brother. Recently, the Rune Boys got a new member from the south side of Dominaria, the Hoarding Broodlord. I know this costs 1 more mana, but this is a bonkers budget card for this deck. These cards just let you get whatever you need, man. Now that brings us to Reanimator targets and Clash winners. Notably, Amanatu's Augury can be a really mean card in this deck. It's just a little baby doing some nefarious doings with some moths out there in the night, dude, especially if you're casting it in the early turns off a Marvo Clash trigger. There's a good mix of card types in this deck, I'll tell you what. Exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Until end of turn for each non-land card type, you may cast a spell of that type from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost, which is kind of neat because these cards are not cast as part of the resolution of Amanatu's Augury. You can sequence things if you like, cast them later in the turn if you need to. Mind Leech Mass. I saw one of these in the bathroom at Taco Bell. It's 5 blue, a black for a creature horror. It's a 6/6 with trample. Whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, you may look at that player's hand. If you do, you may cast a spell from among those cards without paying its mana cost. Just grab a spell, any spell, creature spell, wheel, even a damn soul ring, brother. Now in addition to Swiftfoot Boots, we run a little protection for our guy Marvo. Is that Lizzo? No way, man, it's the Star Whale. 6 blue for a creature, alien whale. It's an 8/8. Might be Lizzo, actually. Flying and vigilance. Other creatures you control have ward 2. Has to spend 6 for 1 in the blue, but we don't really care about that, man. Listen, this is a giant beater, dude. It's just a giant Lizzo out there in the stars, brother. Returned from the dead. Look at this guy. Here's Torgar. He's trouble. This guy, man, just blasts somebody for 20 damage on the way into the battlefield. Torgar actually deletes entire bags of Cheetos from people's pantries, brother. This guy deletes your damn health insurance. And listen, man, this is the perfect deck for Shard of the Void Dragon. This guy's 4 black for a creature, a Satan. It's a 7/7 with flying. Has Spear of the Void Dragon. Whenever Shard of the Void Dragon attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield or is put into exile from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this guy. This is bonkers and a Treasure's Clue food meta, which is a meta we all exist in at this point. This is just a fun buff space monster. He doesn't get enough love, just like your host Nikki G. So there are 20 or so targets in this deck, lots of ramp too, a couple pricier rocks that tap for 2 mana, so we can also just cast these out of our hand if we need to later in the game. This deck accumulates lots of value by turn 7 or so. You got all kinds of big scary creatures out there. That's the fun of a Reanimator deck, you know. You get a Brainstealer Dragon out on turn 3 and all of a sudden everybody thinks you're the damn problem. If there's one thing I love, it's big, stupid, scary stuff that people sleep on because they're not super efficient. Who cares if it costs 8 mana? We're cheating it in with Marvo. Whatever, man. This deck is just surprisingly good for 50 bucks. Check out the deck list I'm going to put in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to buy me a coffee at the link. I'm going to put that in the description too, man. If you want to support the channel, or the free thing you can do is just click on the buttons, man. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Helps tremendously, you know. Check out the list, subscribe, comment, share your trauma if you want to. It's Nikki G from Better Commander, signing off.